Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. We have Minnesota down 0-3, pretty big hole, to a Dallas team that is pantsing everybody, including the media and broader fandom and public, with their incredible backcourt in Luka and Kyrie Irving. I'm going to start quickly with Minnesota. Positives: Jaden and Naz have been tremendous in producing offensively for the Wolves. Almost hit the game winner after Luka hit what was ultimately the game winner. Jaden is transforming himself into a reliable kick-out outside corner shooter, which is incredible to see on his end. But of course, the biggest headlines of this series, for Minnesota at least, are going to be the negatives. So let's jump into it. Of course, number one is, as a team, they really just can't close. Kind of insane when you look at it. You have, in the first game, they led with 2 minutes left. In the second game, led with 4 seconds left. In the third game, led with 5 minutes left. All 3 games so far decided within crunch time, which, 2 ways to look at. My first reaction when I see that is, I don't think Minnesota can afford to let themselves get into a shootout with Dallas. Full stop. Point blank. Clearly limits to what Anthony Edwards is capable of performing and producing offensively, particularly at this stage. As a team that is known for their defense, number 1 rated defense all season long, I also think there's a limit to that as well. If you watch the third game, there were phenomenal defensive efforts on display to stop a Luka or Kyrie shot, and it just isn't fundamentally or physically possible on some of these shots. Credit to them. That is how the game works. And I think this is why folks say it's an offensively sided league. There are very clear limitations to the amount of incredible defense that you can play that will meaningfully disrupt or slow down certain players. Luka and Kyrie are making really tough shots, really deep shots. Why ultimately I believe that Minnesota's defense has to give its offense enough of a cushion going into the fourth quarter or going into crunch time. It's just not looking like Minnesota is going to be able to meaningfully disrupt Kyrie and Luka in clutch time here. Because again, if it comes down to a shootout with Luka and Kyrie, Ant and Cat have proven at this point they are simply unable to do so. Leads us to the next point, which is, of course, probably heard by now that the Stars just aren't scoring. We'll just get this out of the way. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving have scored 181 points on 49% shooting overall, including 42% from 3. Ant and Cat have scored 70 points fewer on 34% from the floor and 23% from 3. And again, this entire series has been decided with less than 5 minutes to go in the game. The limiting reagent and what introduces the ceiling is always the offense, which is unfortunate because they already have clearly one of the best two-way players in the league. It just happens to be the case that he is completely without experience at this level of his professional career, and he is going against dynamic, older, Hall of Fame, either have an MVP or will get an MVP, current players right now that are virtually nearing at the peak of their powers. And it is very much to be putting on Anthony Edwards' shoulders by himself. However, that is where Karl-Anthony Towns comes into play. And unfortunately, after speaking so highly of him and how much it has proven for Cat to have played so well inside of that series and all of the naysayers and et cetera, we are now seeing the complete horseshoe all the way ring around the rosy to kind of what a lot of those naysayers were expecting, which is a Karl-Anthony Towns abysmal offensive shooting performance. And the reason I'm honing in on him is because Anthony Edwards at this point has earned and commandeered such a reputation as an offensive superpower in and of himself that, in his own words in the postgame from this game, when he's able to get to the rim, There are literally 4 Mavericks there waiting for him to stop him. The worse that the broader Wolves team shoots from the outside, the more and more the Mavericks are going to sit in the driving gaps for Ant and be okay with that. Earlier in the postseason, when they played Phoenix, when they played Denver, they had guys making those shots, which forced the defense to keep them honest and open up driving lanes for Ant. It's just simply not there. And if they call your bluff and they're just going to try to stop Anthony Edwards in this singular offensive initiator that unfortunately isn't at a Luka or Jokic level, you are just not going to be very successful. That's why you're seeing a ton of turnovers from Ant, and a lot of them coming and looking like he's almost too small or something. Dallas is very long, and their size is really, really great too. Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington, even Luka. A lot of these turnovers are sailing over guys' hands and heads and things like that. He's trying to force quick passes and stuff to Rudy Gobert and the slips that he just has never been able to really handle and do. It honestly sucks to watch a little bit because you watch Ant get the ball around the ring or whatever, and it honestly feels like he's playing 1-on-4 or 1-on-5, literally. I think, one, you're just not seeing enough movement off the ball from Minnesota to try to cause distractions and open up said driving lanes for him. I think, in addition, Mike Conley is another key piece here where I think he needs to be less like Jamal Murray, where he's the secondary initiator and off-ball guy that's going to spot up and shoot, and be more like a Kyrie Irving and play like a traditional point guard and have Ant be making off-ball cuts and slashes and kind of being less of that primary initiator. Because as we're seeing, it's stalling the complete offense. It's stalling everything about this offense with them playing through him. Ant got hot in the third quarter after a very emphatic dunk that everyone probably saw, had just 4 points in the fourth quarter total. That is frustrating. And that leads to the next point around frustration fouls. I think Jaden and Kat getting into foul trouble in this past game was a huge hamstring for the team. Literally under 4 minutes into the third quarter, they had committed enough team fouls to the point where the Mavericks were shooting free throws on every single foul there on out. Really, really not good, particularly when your best on-ball defender in Jaden is one of the guys getting in foul trouble. 1 or 2 of his fouls were really bad, too. I mean, he's just grabbing on Luka's arm, and he's just kind of flailing and freaking out about it. It's like, dude, like, that's clearly a frustration foul. Overall takeaways, in contrast to Denver, it's all about pace of playmaking and decision-making, which, of course, requires maturity. It requires experience that, unfortunately, Ant Edwards just physically could not have at this point of his overall career. But you see Ant and Kat both lacking the playmaking required to break down this defense. You have athletic, long guys on the other team, aside from Kyrie, who is having one of his greatest defensive postseason performances ever. You kind of have to really, really get them to bite on something that you want them to think you're going to do, or you kind of have to beat them with raw one-on-one ability here, because, again, they're not doubling Ant. They're not giving him the satisfaction of being able to pass out of that and play 4-on-3 like Minnesota has had to do against them with Luka and Kyrie, because they know Ant Edwards just doesn't have the playmaking chops to effectively get around guys and then make the right reads or, create advantages by himself. You need to be able to play make against their set defense. It's not like Ant called out, it's not like they have Lively come up to the level of the screen and then he can slip it, over top to guys or whatever that Phoenix and Denver had done before. Essentially needs to play Jamal Murray style of point guard and initiator, where you're going to get open space in the mid-range and you need to be able to rise up and hit those tough shots. But if you don't do that, you have to be cool with Derrick Jones Jr. chasing you like the boogeyman and then doing the Luka Doncic, are you going to defend me? Are you going to defend the rim? Whichever one you don't do, I'm going to punish you with. Like, you have to essentially be a point guard is the problem. And I think that it is unfortunately one of those things that you have to go through the tribulations, moments of struggle to really overcome and work on. Again, this is the second year of this entire Minnesota double big lineup whole experimentation. it should serve as absolutely zero surprise that this iteration of the Minnesota Timberwolves is blatantly struggling to pivot its entire schema around a completely different opponent to Denver. The opponent that Minnesota has been designed and cultivated and indoctrinated to defeat. It wasn't a tandem duo two-headed monster at the guard position specifically. It's the weakest component of its defensive apparatus is the guard position. And then in addition to that, you have Minnesota's size that, in my opinion, isn't at the level of quickness and coordination of Dallas's, where you have Lively, Gafford, who admittedly, well, Lively is very tall. He is basically the same size as Gobert, but he has great hands, and he can play make fluidly, and he can have this kind of court awareness in terms of where he is with the rim and actually sort of finish things. Then you have Gafford, who is very, very athletic, very quick twitch, can finish everything near the basket, isn't afraid of contact. But both of those guys are athletic. Think about that in contrast to Gobert and Cat. Like a runaway train car about half of the time. That is Cat's shortcoming, and it probably always will be, is the fact that it doesn't seem like he will ever be able to get to the level of athletic coordination, spatial awareness that Daniel Gafford has, or Lively already has shown he is. And so that's where you get foul trouble from Cat. That's where you get Gobert barely able to play make 8 feet from the basket. He is going to pass out of help, even if the help is literally Jamal Murray like last series. It's like, dude, you can't work on a literal just like shot, just drop it in the rim. No, he can't. That's just not what he's able to do. In my opinion, like PJ Washington and Jalen Johnson and Atlanta are like literally concocted and designed in a laboratory or petri dish or 3D printer, the perfect for power forward position. Absolute raptor, insane levels of athleticism at their size and length. They play bigger than they actually are. PJ's only 6'7" or so, or 6'8". Feels like he's like 6'11" sometimes. Cat, not even close to that. He's very clunky and does not, unfortunately, have the same level of body control. In theory, at least, Cat should be able to outshoot him, but that hasn't been the case. Way more athleticism at maybe a little bit less size, but not that much less size on Dallas's side means Anthony Edwards and all of their creators and initiators have to be that much faster and more polished with their decision-making. Definitely once they get inside of the arc, but just generally speaking, this is just a very, very athletic Dallas team that is very long and big as well. Mismatches per se, you're seeing a little bit of what plagued Valanciunas when the Pelicans played the Thunder, where, I mean, the Thunder were just way too quick, and they were just gobbling up the ball from Valanciunas. He just could not effectively get good entry passes and then actually get to his spots before getting stripped. Quickness disparity on both ends of the court, it's like, if you don't have polished enough handles and, again, spatial awareness and understanding of the scheme and where guys are respacing to and all these things, you're going to force a bad shot, you're going to miss the pass, or you're going to cause an offensive foul. Like, those are really the three options that happen to big guys when they try to play a big style of game against guys who are, sure, a little bit smaller, but are way more athletic, way more coordinated, and that's kind of what you're seeing. And I think that, in my opinion, that's kind of the issue that they're up against right now. Whereas Aaron Gordon, love him to death. Honestly, my favorite Nuggets player, frankly, on that roster right now. Nowhere close to the level of quick twitch, muscle, fiber, reaction, darting everywhere to the ball, running, sprinting out in transition, being able to close out very, very quickly. PJ Washington is just faster and probably longer, and still doesn't even give that much size to begin with. So I think it's just a genuinely tough matchup. Last but not least is attacking Luka. Conley, Cat, unless they start making shots, I don't even think N is going to be able to clear this out, honestly, like straight up. I think that Dallas is going to call that bluff there. And until basically other guys are able to knock down shots, it's going to be really tough for Ant to play the same exact style of game that we all know he's good at, that he was able to play in the previous 2 series. This one, he needs to be able to pass more like a point guard and make those quick twitch, read, react, playmaking decisions that, again, he really hasn't been tested on yet this postseason. I do have a lot to say about Dallas, but you know what? I'm going to hold off on that. I will make the next video about Dallas just because I need these videos to be quicker. Suffice to say, I love Hardy on Dallas a lot. I just want that to be known. I just think he's fantastic as a backup guy, putting on that scoring pressure. There's really no time where offensively it feels like Dallas is taking their foot off the gas, a little bit like Minnesota on defense, right? When they bring in Naz Reid, Alexander Walker, etc. So it's really interesting fire and ice dilemma there. And then, of course, we have just Kyrie Irving. And I put out these post-game compilation videos for a reason. It's to highlight the kind of things that we've been hearing from Kyrie Irving from these post-games, and just how incredible of a leader and how just in touch spiritually, psychologically he is with himself, and how he's exuberating that onto the team and keeping them positive, keeping them calm. It just seems like a tremendous, tremendous story arc and redemption story for Kyrie Irving. And honestly, I love it. This is, as people, as enthusiasts for unexpected storylines and excitement, this is what I think we should all be living for. All right, guys, that is it for today, and until next time.